Winter in New York has always been harsh, but for Mary Thompson, the cold days seem even colder in her solitude. The small stone house on the outskirts of the city is both her refuge and her prison. The walls that once witnessed laughter and lively conversations now echo only the silence of a solitary life. Mary wakes up every day with the sunrise, a routine she has maintained since the days when her beloved husband, John, was still alive. She prepares her breakfast, a cup of black coffee and a slice of bread with butter, and sits at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the world that seems to move on without her. "Oh, John," she sighs, glancing at the empty chair across from her. "How empty the days seem without you." The hours pass, filled with household chores that Mary performs meticulously, more out of habit than necessity. Cleaning, tidying, cooking, anchors that keep her tied to a routine and prevent her from getting lost in memories. In the afternoon, she settles into her favorite armchair, a piece worn by time, but still comfortable. She spends hours flipping through photo albums, her most precious treasure. Each page turned is a journey back in time, a plunge into memories that warm her heart but also squeeze it with a sharp pain of nostalgia. "Look at you, darling," she murmurs, touching a photo of her daughter, Emily, as a child. "Where are you now? Why don't you look for me anymore?" The photos tell of a well-lived life. Her marriage to John, the birth of Emily, the birthdays, the Christmases, the summer vacations on the coast. But the most recent pages are blank, as if Mary's life has frozen in time. The neighbors, on their rare visits, try to lift her spirits. "Mrs. Thompson, why don't you come have tea with us this afternoon?" they ask, but Mary always refuses, preferring the familiar melancholy of her solitude. The nights are the hardest. As night falls over the small house, the ghosts of the past seem to come alive. Mary can almost hear Emily's laughter echoing through the halls, John's deep voice calling her to dinner. "I'm going crazy," she tells herself, shaking her head to dispel the illusions. On one particularly cold evening, Mary prepares for another solitary meal. The wind howls and rattles the windows. She had made onion soup, John's favorite, more out of habit than appetite. Sitting at the kitchen table with only the ticking of the old wall clock for company, Mary lifts the spoon to her lips. It's then that she hears it, a faint, almost imperceptible knock that makes her freeze, the spoon suspended in midair. "It must be the wind," she whispers to herself, but the sound comes again, a little louder this time. Heart pounding, Mary slowly gets up. She approaches the front door with hesitant steps, years of solitude having made her cautious, almost fearful of the outside world. "Who's there?" she calls out, her voice trembling. There is no response, only the howling wind. With trembling fingers, she turns the handle and cracks the door open. The cold winter wind rushes in, bringing with it a few snowflakes. Mary glances outside, her eyes straining to see in the darkness. At first, there is nothing but the black night and the gently falling snow. Then her eyes catch a movement, something small, wrapped in a blanket, on the doorstep. Mary's heart stops for a moment, her mind struggling to comprehend what she sees. Slowly, almost out of breath, she opens the door wider. The silence of the night is broken by a sound Mary hasn't heard in decades, a sound that makes her heart leap and her hands tremble even more, the faint cry of a baby. The baby's cry pierces the cold night, striking Mary's heart. With trembling hands, she bends down and picks up the small bundle. The baby is cold, wrapped in a thin blanket that barely protects it from the biting cold. "My God," Mary murmurs, quickly bringing the baby inside. Her maternal instinct, dormant for so many years, awakens instantly. She holds the baby close to her chest, trying to warm it with her body heat. In the kitchen, Mary quickly improvises. She runs some water and begins to unwrap the baby carefully. It was a boy, so small and fragile that her heart ached. There were no notes, no explanation for the abandonment of this innocent child. "Hush, hush," she murmurs, gently rocking the baby as she prepares a warm bath. "Everything is okay now, little one. You are safe." After the bath, Mary wraps the baby in a soft towel and feeds him warm milk with a small spoon. The little boy drinks greedily, his tiny eyes fixed on Mary's face. The reality of the situation begins to set in. What should she do? Her mind tells her to call the authorities immediately, but her heart is already clinging to this little being that fate has placed in her arms. The baby asleep in her arms, Mary picks up the phone. With trembling hands, she dials the police number. "Hello, NYPD?" she begins, her voice low to avoid waking the baby. But she hears only static on the other end of the line. The storm must have cut the line. Mary looks out the window. The snow is falling harder, covering everything in a white blanket. It would be impossible to go out and get help tonight. "It looks like it's just you and me tonight, little one," she murmurs to the sleeping baby. The hours pass, and Mary can't sleep. Sitting in her armchair, she watches the baby resting in an improvised nest of blankets. Questions tumble through her mind. Who could abandon such a precious child? How can someone be so cruel? As the night progresses, a wild, impossible idea begins to take root in her mind. What if, she starts to think, what if I keep him? Morning arrives, and with it, Mary's decision. She knew it was risky, perhaps even illegal, but something inside her told her that this baby was a gift, a second chance that life was offering her. "You need a name, little one," she says softly, caressing the baby's cheek. "How about Ethan?" "Yes, you look like an Ethan." In the days that follow, Mary finds herself swept up in a whirlwind of emotions and activity. She improvises diapers from old towels, prepares bottles with powdered milk found at the back of a cupboard, and spends sleepless nights tending to Ethan. Each smile, every little noise he makes, is like a ray of sunshine penetrating the shadows that have inhabited Mary's heart for so long. She finds herself singing lullabies she hasn't sung in decades, telling stories to this little one who doesn't even understand the words yet. "You are my miracle, Ethan," she murmurs to the baby as she feeds him. "My little angel sent from heaven." The house, once silent and melancholy, is now full of life. Ethan's cries, his coos, Mary's hums as she cares for him, all fill the rooms with a new energy. Mary knows what she's doing is risky. She knows she will have to face the consequences of her decision sooner or later. But for the first time in years, she feels alive, with a purpose. One evening, as she looks at the stars through the window, she promises the baby, "Everything will be all right, my little Ethan. Grandma Mary will take care of you, no matter what." And so, in that small house on the outskirts of New York, a new, makeshift family begins its journey. Mary, the lonely widow, and Ethan, the abandoned baby, united by fate and the unconditional love that only a grandmother's heart can offer. Time passes like the pages of a book in the wind. Ethan grows quickly, and with him, Mary's love blossoms more and more. The once silent house now echoes with children's laughter and lively conversations. At the age of 3, Ethan is a whirlwind of energy, his golden curls bouncing as he runs around the garden, chasing butterflies and inventing imaginary adventures. "Grandma, look what I found!" Ethan exclaims, running towards Mary with his hands full of wildflowers. Mary, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch, smiles radiantly. "Oh, my darling, what beautiful flowers! Let's put them in a vase, shall we?" Together, they arrange the flowers in an antique vase, Ethan telling tales of how the flowers are magical and can grant wishes. Mary listens attentively, marveling at the boy's fertile imagination. Financial difficulties are a constant reality. Mary's small pension barely covers the basic expenses, and now there is an extra mouth to feed. But she is creative. She has planted a small garden in the backyard, growing fresh vegetables that help save money on groceries. "Grandma, can I help water the plants?" Ethan asks eagerly, wanting to participate. "Of course, my little one. Come, I'll show you how to take care of each of them." These lessons in the garden become precious moments of learning and connection. Mary teaches Ethan not only about plants, but also about life, patience, and the value of hard work. As Ethan grows, the neighbors start to ask questions. Curious looks follow them when they walk down the street. Whispers and speculations circulate in the neighborhood. "Mrs. Thompson," asks Mrs. Jones, the nosy neighbor, one day, "where does that boy come from? I didn't know you had grandchildren." Mary, with a serene smile, responds, "Ethan is a gift that life has given me, Mrs. Jones. That's all you need to know." These exchanges cause Mary anxiety, but she holds on. The love she feels for Ethan outweighs any fear or judgment. Evenings are cherished moments. Mary tells Ethan stories, often made up on the spot, inspired by her own experiences. "Grandma, tell me again the story of the prince who lived in a pretty house," Ethan requests, nestled under the covers. Mary laughs. "But I told you that one yesterday, my dear. How about a new story today?" And so, she begins to weave magical tales that make Ethan's eyes shine with wonder. Over the years, Mary rediscovers the world through Ethan's eyes. Colors seem more vibrant, sounds more melodic. She finds herself humming while cooking, dancing with Ethan in the living room to the sound of the old radio. On Ethan's 5th birthday, Mary has saved for months to buy him a small cake and a special gift, an illustrated storybook. "Happy birthday, my little treasure," she says, handing him the wrapped package. Ethan's eyes widen with joy at the sight of the book. "Thank you, Grandma. Can you read it to me?" "Of course, my dear. Let's read together." That night, as they read the stories, Mary feels a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly brings her to tears. Ethan had brought light and purpose back into her life. The difficulties persist. There are nights when Mary goes to bed with a growling stomach, ensuring that Ethan has had enough to eat. There are days when the cold seeps into their poorly heated home, and they huddle together under the covers, telling stories to forget the discomfort. But each challenge is met with determination and love. Mary has found a strength she never knew she had, driven by the desire to give Ethan a happy and secure life. One evening, as they prepare for bed, Ethan says to her, "Grandma, you are the best grandma in the world." Mary holds him tightly in her arms, her heart overflowing with love. "And you, my little Ethan, are the greatest gift I could ever receive." And so, day by day, year by year, Mary and Ethan build their life together, a small, unconventional family united by deep and sincere love. For Mary, every moment spent with Ethan is a blessing, a second chance to live and love fully. It is on an autumn afternoon that a knock comes at the door of the small house. Ethan, now 7, is sitting at the kitchen table, focused on his homework, while Mary prepares a snack. "Who is it, Grandma?" Ethan asks curiously. Mary, with a reassuring smile, replies, "I don't know, my dear. Keep doing your lesson. I'll see who it is." Opening the door, Mary feels her heart freeze. Standing before her are 2 serious-looking women in formal attire. "Mrs. Thompson?" asks the taller of the 2. "I am Amelia Jones from Social Services, and this is my colleague, Claire Miller. May we come in? We have some questions to ask you." The fear that Mary has dreaded materializes. With trembling hands, she invites them in, casting a worried glance toward the kitchen where Ethan sits. "Ethan, my dear," she calls, trying to keep her voice calm. "Why don't you go play in your room for a bit? Grandma needs to talk to these ladies." Sensing the tension in Mary's voice, Ethan hesitates for a moment before obeying. As he passes the visitors, he gives them a curious and slightly frightened look. In the living room, Mary sits, feeling the weight of her 77 years. The social workers take their seats, their scrutinizing eyes examining every detail of the modest but clean and welcoming home. "Mrs. Thompson," begins Amelia, "we received an anonymous complaint regarding the situation with young Ethan. We understand that he has been living with you for quite some time." "How long exactly?" Mary takes a deep breath, gathering her courage. 7 years, since he was a baby." "And what is your relationship with him?" Claire asks, her tone softer but no less inquisitive. "I found him," Mary admits, her voice slightly trembling. "He was abandoned on my doorstep one winter night, and I've raised him as my grandson ever since." The social workers exchange a significant look. Amelia leans forward, her tone becoming more severe. "Mrs. Thompson, do you understand that what you did is illegal? You should have informed the authorities immediately." Mary's eyes fill with tears, but she refuses to let them fall. "I know, but that night he was so cold, so helpless. I tried to call the police, but the lines were down because of the storm, and then I couldn't let him go." Claire, a bit more understanding, asks, "And how have you managed to take care of him? Do you have enough means?" Mary straightens in her chair, a spark of determination in her eyes. "It hasn't been easy, but we've managed. Ethan has never gone hungry. He's always had clean clothes and a roof over his head. And most importantly, he has love, a lot of love." The social workers continue their questions, delving into all aspects of Ethan's life, his education, his health, his daily routine. Mary answers honestly, her love and dedication shining through every word. As the conversation continues, a noise from the hallway draws everyone's attention. Ethan is there, his eyes wide with fear. "Grandma," he calls in a small, frightened voice, "are these ladies going to take me away?" Mary's heart breaks at the sight of the fear in her little boy's eyes. She extends her arms, and Ethan rushes to her, burying his face in her lap. "No, my dear," she murmurs, stroking his hair. "No one is going to take you. Grandma won't let that happen." The social workers witness the scene in silence, their expressions softening visibly. The love between Mary and Ethan is palpable, undeniable. After a few moments, Amelia sniffs softly. "Well, Mrs. Thompson, we have more questions to resolve, but for now, I think we've seen enough." Claire adds with a slight smile, "We will make follow-up visits, and there is paperwork to be filled out, but it is clear that Ethan is well cared for and loved here." When the social workers finally leave, Mary closes the door and leans against it, exhausted but relieved. Ethan hugs her tightly. "Grandma, you promised. Do you promise again that we will always be together?" Mary kneels to meet Ethan's eyes. "I promise, my little treasure. Always together, you and me against the world." That night, while Ethan sleeps peacefully, Mary stays awake, silently thanking the miracle that is her grandson and the chance to continue being his family. Autumn paints the trees in shades of gold and red, heralding Ethan's 10th birthday. Mary, now 80 years old, but with a spirit rejuvenated by her grandson's presence, has prepared a small celebration. "Ethan, my dear," she calls from the kitchen, "can you go to the market and get the eggs I forgot? We need them for the cake." Ethan, playing in the garden with his pet dog, a mutt named Max, responds joyfully. "Of course, Grandma. Can I take Max with me?" "Of course," Mary replies, smiling. "But be careful and don't take too long." As Ethan heads out the gate, Max trotting alongside him, Mary watches from the kitchen window, her heart filled with pride and love for the boy she has raised. Ethan was becoming a kind and intelligent young man, always ready to help and with a contagious smile. At that moment, as her eyes follow Ethan around the corner, Mary notices something unusual. Parked a few yards from her house is a car that stands out completely from the modest surroundings. It's a luxurious, black vehicle with tinted windows, preventing her from seeing inside. Intrigued and a bit fearful, Mary continues to watch. After a few minutes, the driver's door opens, and a man steps out. He is tall, dressed in an elegant suit that exudes wealth and sophistication. His gray hair is impeccably styled, and his movements are calculated and graceful. The man doesn't approach the house. He remains standing by the car, his eyes fixed on Mary's residence, his expression a mix of anxiety and determination that stirs a feeling of unease in Mary's stomach. "Who is he?" she murmurs to herself, her hands unconsciously clenching the dishcloth she was holding. "What does he want?" For a moment, Mary considers going outside to confront the stranger, to ask what he is doing there. But something holds her back, a powerful, irrational fear that any interaction with this man might somehow threaten the life she has built with Ethan. The minutes drag on like hours. The man remains immobile, simply watching. Occasionally, he checks his watch, as if waiting for something or someone. Mary's heart races when she sees Ethan returning down the road, Max running ahead of him. The boy passes by the car without noticing it, focused on his task and playing with the dog. But the man's eyes follow him, and for an instant, Mary sees an expression of emotion cross his face. Was it recognition? As soon as Ethan enters the gate, the man quickly gets back into his car and drives away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a whirlwind of questions in Mary's mind. "Grandma, I brought the eggs," Ethan announces joyfully as he enters the kitchen. Mary turns, forcing a smile to hide her worry. "Thank you, my dear. You are my #1 helper." As they prepare the cake together, laughing and creating a delightful mess in the kitchen, Mary can't shake the thought of the mysterious man. Who is he? Why was he watching their house? And most importantly, would he come back? That night, after tucking Ethan in with a goodnight kiss and the promise of a special day tomorrow, Mary sits in her favorite armchair, her gaze lost in the darkness beyond the window. The feeling of unease lingers, mingled with a growing fear that the happiness she and Ethan have built might be under threat. "No matter what," she tells herself in a low voice, her determination firming, "I will protect Ethan. He is my family, my life. No one will take him away from me." With this resolve, Mary finally prepares to go to bed, praying silently that tomorrow would bring only joy for Ethan's birthday, and that the mysterious man would be just a passing shadow in their lives. The sun had just begun to rise on the horizon when a deafening roar tore through the sky, pulling Mary from her restless sleep. The sound, a mechanical, pulsating rumble, made the windows of her small house tremble. "My God!" Mary exclaimed, sitting up abruptly in bed, her heart racing, her mind still foggy from sleep, struggling to understand what was happening. The noise intensified, and Mary finally recognized it. It was a helicopter, approaching dangerously close. With surprising agility for her 80 years, driven by fear and adrenaline, Mary leapt out of bed. Her feet barely touched the cold floor as she ran down the hallway toward Ethan's room. "Ethan! Ethan!" she cried, her voice almost inaudible beneath the roar of the helicopter. Reaching the door of the little boy's room, Mary flung it open desperately. Her eyes scanned the room frantically, searching for her precious grandson. To her immense relief, Ethan wasn't in his bed. Instead, he stood by the window, his face lit with an expression of pure fascination and excitement. "Grandma!" Ethan exclaimed, turning to her, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Look at that! It's a real helicopter!" Mary rushed to the window, wrapping Ethan in her arms to protect him. In the field adjacent to their property, an imposing black helicopter was landing, its blades still spinning and sending gusts of wind that made the grass dance violently. "My God," Mary murmured again, her heart pounding in her chest. The sight of the helicopter reminded her of the previous afternoon, the luxury car, the mysterious man watching her house. Could the two events be related? "Grandma, can we go see it up close?" Ethan asked, his excitement momentarily overriding his curiosity about the helicopter. "Please, please!" Mary tightened her grip on her grandson, her fear clutching her heart. "No, my dear, it's too dangerous. We need to stay inside, where it's safe." But as she spoke, Mary saw a figure emerging from the helicopter. Even from a distance, she recognized the elegant posture, the impeccable suit. It was the same man who had watched their house the day before. "Who is that, Grandma?" Ethan asked, his curiosity now outweighing his excitement. "He looks important." Mary swallowed hard, her mind racing with possibilities, each more frightening than the last. "I don't know, my dear, but don't worry. Grandma will take care of everything." At that moment, as if sensing he was being watched, the man turned toward Mary's house. Even from afar, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. He began to walk toward the house with a determined and steady stride. "Ethan," Mary said, struggling to keep her voice calm, "I want you to stay here in your room. Close the door and don't come out, no matter what. Do you understand?" Ethan, finally realizing the gravity of the situation from the tone of his grandmother's voice, nodded solemnly. "Yes, Grandma. But will everything be all right?" Mary forced a smile, caressing her grandson's face. "Of course, my treasure. Grandma will handle it, always." After hugging Ethan one last time, Mary left the room, closing the door behind her. She descended the stairs, her legs slightly trembling, but her determination firm. Whoever this man was, whatever his purpose, she was ready to face him. Mary reached the front door just as the bell rang. Taking a deep breath and straightening her shoulders, she turned the handle, preparing for whatever came next. The door opened, revealing the elegant man standing on the threshold. His piercing blue eyes met Mary's for a moment. Neither spoke, the only sound being the distant hum of the helicopter blades slowing down. Finally, the man broke the silence, his deep voice laden with emotion. "Mrs. Thompson, my name is James Peterson, and I believe we have a lot to discuss about Ethan." Mary felt her legs weaken at the mention of Ethan's name by this stranger. She leaned against the doorframe, her eyes fixed on James Peterson. "Please, Mrs. Thompson," James said, his voice trembling with emotion. "May I come in? I have a story to tell you that will change our lives forever." Hesitant, Mary stepped aside and led him into the modest living room. James sat down, his agitated hands betraying his nervousness. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, 10 years ago, my wife gave birth to a baby boy, but she suffered from severe postpartum depression. One day, she disappeared with the baby. When she returned, she said she had lost him." His voice faltered. I believed her. We spent years in counseling, trying to recover from the loss. Mary listened, stunned, her heart pounding with each word. James continued, 2 years ago, my wife, consumed by guilt, confessed the truth before ending her own life. She hadn't lost our son. She had abandoned him. Tears now streamed down James' face. Since then, I have been searching for my son relentlessly. Every lead, every rumor, every piece of evidence has led me here, to Ethan. Mary felt the world spin around her, her mind struggling to process this shocking revelation. But how can you be sure? James pulled a crumpled photo from his pocket, a newborn baby, sleeping peacefully. The resemblance to Ethan was undeniable. "Oh my God," Mary murmured, tears filling her eyes. "Mrs. Thompson," James said, leaning forward, "I cannot express my gratitude for what you have done for Ethan. You saved him, raised him, loved him when I couldn't. Panic rose in Mary. Are you going to take him? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To her surprise, James shook his head. No, Mrs. Thompson, I cannot separate Ethan from the only mother he has ever known. Instead, I have a proposal for you. He took a deep breath before continuing. I would like to invite you, Mrs. Thompson, to come and live on my estate. We could raise Ethan together. You would still be his grandmother, and I could get to know my son. We could be a family, unconventional but united by our love for Ethan. Mary was speechless, overwhelmed by this unexpected proposal. James continued, I know it's a lot to take in, but think of the possibilities. Ethan would have the best of both worlds, your love and care, and the opportunities one can provide. And you, Mrs. Thompson, would never have to worry about financial hardships again. At that moment, light footsteps were heard on the stairs. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide with curiosity. Grandma. He hesitated. Who is this man? James turned, tears filling his eyes, as he saw his son for the first time. Ethan, he called softly, his voice trembling. Mary held out her arms, and Ethan ran to her, seeking comfort in her familiar embrace. She looked from James to Ethan and back again. At that moment, Mary saw the future unfolding before her. She saw Ethan growing up, loved and cared for by both her and his father. She saw herself freed from the financial worries that had plagued her for so long. And most importantly, she saw the chance to keep Ethan in her life, to remain his beloved grandmother. With tears in her eyes and a trembling smile on her lips, Mary finally spoke. Mr. Peterson, I believe we have a lot to talk about. And Ethan, she said, turning to her grandson, there is someone very special I want you to meet. As the morning sun flooded the room, illuminating the emotional faces of these three people, a new family began to form, united by their love for a special boy and the hope for a bright future together.